Everyone, good morning. Welcome to Harmony Across Generations virtual training sponsored by Monterey County Works today. My name is Anna Manzano. I'm the digital media and event strategist here at the California Employers Association. Before we get into today's presentation, I have just a couple details to cover with you. So as you see, your audio is going to be muted for today's presentation, but as Keith is already doing so in the chat, there's going to be lots of opportunities to engage during today's session. Handouts for this training, those were sent out in yesterday's reminder email, but I will also drop the file into the chat in the next few minutes. Speaking of the chat box, if you have any questions about the content, Keisha's going to have a couple of polls, ask you to engage with her today. She's going to ask some questions and ask you to put the question or your answers into the chat. But if you have any questions about today's content, you can put that into the chat as well. I'll be here the whole time helping out, making sure that all of your questions get addressed today. And last but not least, we do have a survey. It is 5 questions. It takes about a minute to complete, but the feedback that you provide to us in those 5 questions that we then share with our partners over at Monterey County, and collectively we just make sure that we're meeting and hopefully exceeding your expectations with trainings like this, as well as the entire suite of resources available to employers like yourself. So if you could take the minute at the end, you will see a QR code. I'll also drop a link into the chat, and that will help us take your feedback to heart and really make sure that we're bringing you as much peace of mind as possible. So thank you in advance for that. So as I mentioned, today's training is going to be sponsored by our partners over at Monterey County. Today, we are so privileged to have Laura Kirshner, who is the Business Services Specialist, to share more about the resources available to you.
Well, thank you so much, and thank you to CEA for hosting this event for us. We are very grateful. It has been a invaluable service, and we're very happy to be here. I want to encourage employers who are hiring or might need some help with some incentivized training to work with us here over at Monterey County Works, also known as the Monterey County Workforce Development Board. We're in the downtown Salinas area, for those that know Salinas, and we are ready and standing by to help businesses that have questions. All of our services are provided at no cost. They are prepaid for by your tax dollars, so be sure and take advantage of some of the things that we have to offer. Our website is montereycountyworks.com. montereycountyworks.com, or my coworker and I can be reached at 796-3341, 796-3341. We've got all kinds of different services to support your business. We're have the pleasure of producing some hiring videos locally for businesses that are hiring. We also have something called a Workforce Minute that we're putting together, and that tells a little bit about your business. It's not a hiring video, but it's everything from labor market information to a little more in detail about our sectors. We've got some supporting business strategies that you can take advantage of. Take a peek at what we have to offer on montereycountyworks.com. There's a lot of things that we have to support your business. We are so glad to have a good turnout today, and we're looking forward to learning more about this webinar. Thank you so much. Look forward to hearing from you.
All right, awesome. Thank you, Laura, and your entire team behind the scenes for not just sponsoring today's training, but the entire HR hotline and your entire suite of resources for employers like those who are joining. See a question, I will address that separately. So now I have the privilege of introducing our trainer today. We have our amazing Keisha Hansen, who is our Learning and Development Director. And I know you have such juicy content to deliver, and so the floor is all yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Monterey County Workforce Development Board. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to attend this webinar on Harmony Across Generations. If for some reason you're not familiar with us, California Employers Association, very briefly, we are a human resource association. We serve employers throughout the state of California, all businesses, all industries, even some outside of California these days that might have employees located in California or might have some selected locations in California. And our goal really for our employers is to provide them peace of mind by providing some exceptional human resource compliance solutions. If you are a member and you give us a call, we're available Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, and we can give you some guidance and direction. We also do trainings in addition to these webinars. We also can do on-site trainings for your company, either virtually or on-site. And also we do recruiting and some additional human resource assistant. So if any of that piqued your interest, you can give us a call at our 800 number located right there. And I want to give peace of mind to our lawyers by letting you know this presentation should not be relied upon as legal advice. I am not a lawyer. But if you are in search of a lawyer, we do partner with several attorneys throughout the state. So again, if you give us a call, we might be able to direct you to somebody in your area. Okay, with that said, in the limited time that we have today, we are going to talk about the multiple generations in the workplace. And I don't know about you, but this seems to be an ever-trending topic, whether it's coming up in the media or in the news or within your own workplace. So we will be kind of giving you an overall definition of each generation that's working and who's actually representing what percentage in the workplace today. It is a good idea to have some insight on each generation and their background. It is really, again, hard not to run into posts on social medias or headlines about the battle between generations, sometimes portrayed as not being able to see eye to eye on several issues. Sometimes it's a little less relevant, such as which generations are wearing what kind of socks. If you know, you know, to more credible issues in terms of, again, how are generations communicating and able to thrive at work. One disclosure I am going to say is to keep in mind that generational categories aren't scientific. They are not hard facts. So I don't encourage using generational labels as they can lead to stereotyping and oversimplification. And none of us chose the era or year that we were born. We didn't have a choice. So as a result, we were all exposed to different events, different advancements in technology, and different overall life experiences during those different times. Some of these might have influenced who we are, but nothing trumps us as individuals. We are all going to bring our own life experiences, our own perspectives to the table. So when we think of generations, we're just going to think of what might have helped shape us and how can we more collectively work together, right? Because we want to create that inclusive work culture. One of the areas that is commented and shared with us by our employers is how do we communicate more effectively across the different generations with all the multiple platforms that are available. So we'll cover that as well. And again, since we are talking about different generations, let's put up a poll and see which generations are in the house today. So I'm going to put up a poll, and this isn't to gauge your age. It's anonymous. If you have colleagues or peers on here, they don't know how you answered, but it is up. I just want to see which generation are you a part of? Did it not come up? Let's see. I think maybe it didn't. Here we go. So if you're not sure, again, the years are listed there, but again, in different articles and different media, you might see some slight different years posted. But again, for generational purposes, it's usually about every 20 years defines a generation. And again, it's not science, it's actually originated from marketing purposes to classify the different generations. I'll give you a couple more seconds to reply. All right, so we're strong in two of the generations today, Generation X and Millennials. 63% Millennials, which is not unlikely because Millennials are going to be on top for many, many years to come in terms of the percentage represented in the workforce, and Gen X close behind. So nice to have you here all. This is just a quick graphic on, we were talking about the 5 generations at work, but just want you to keep in mind there's another generation underway which they're already categorizing as Generation Alpha. And I believe it's if you go by the 2015, they're almost going to be 10 as of 2025. So imagine what they may be bringing to the workforce in years to come. So as I said, I wanted to show with you which generations and percentages are being represented in the workplace. So our oldest generation, which are known as traditionalists, they're also known as seniors, but our eldest generation only represents about 2% of the workforce. And again, we'll talk a little bit about some of their characteristics and why they're continuing to work in their later years. Followed by baby boomers at 25%. You have Generation X at 33%, millennials at 35%, and Gen Z at 5%. But important to know, to state, especially if you are struggling with your Gen Zers in the workplace, to include and collaborate, they are going estimated to be surpassing the number of baby boomers. And it was estimated by this year. So they're coming close into baby boomers as baby boomers continue to retire from the workforce or go into part-time positions. So interesting to know, important to know. All right, so just a little bit of feedback on what you may look out for in the different generations, what shaped these generations. For our oldest generation, the traditionalists, who are still representing 2%. They may be business owners. They may have started their own companies. They may have family-owned businesses, or they just may need to subsidize their income still, or they just may want to have a position to continue to give service to employers. So again, they're showing up at 2%. What shaped them was definitely the Great Depression. Their parents may have gone through the Great Depression, and a few of them might have gone through the Great Depression. Also, World War II impacted them. So in terms of being frugal, in terms of rationing, saving money was very important to them. During the war, they were used to listening to radio programs to find out what information was going on, because remember, this was prior to television coming into light. And ironically, it has made a comeback in some form. If you're a podcast aficionado, that's similar to listening to the radio. So it's making a comeback. It had an impact. In terms of their work ethic, they're very loyal, very dependable, very formal in terms of the work environment at the time that they were in the workforce. In terms of being loyal to the companies, they were, receiving pensions, and so they were responsible and also long-term employees, which we start to see a little shift in as we get through the different generations. Again, bringing long-term value to the company was very important. Recognition and respect. Again, this is pre some of the advancements in technology. So a lot of face-to-face interaction, a lot of phone calls. If you even recall, maybe you're not a traditionalist, as we've got our millennials and Gen X, but even us, we didn't have a lot of technology at the beginnings of our careers, a lot of memos going back and forth, handwritten notes. So there may be an emphasis or maybe a strength in written communication for that generation. And if you are privileged to have traditionalists still employed, they really are interested in stability, right? So having a good schedule and also providing them satisfying opportunities to contribute. So some of the things to think about when you're thinking about seniors and traditionalists. Next are our baby boomers, which is 1946 to 1964. This is the generation that has begun to retire. They're seeing 10,000 baby boomers reach retirement age daily, yet important to recognize that the majority, more than 65%, plan to continue working past the age of 65. And this can be for numerous reasons. It can be for financial reasons, especially in certain areas of the nation, of the country, in California especially. Also for purpose and satisfaction. We're privileged to have some retired baby boomers come back to work at CEA in part-time positions because they found being retired not satisfying, and they wanted to continue to serve and to have purpose, but with a flexible schedule, right? With a lot of time for that life balance as well. Some of the things about their work ethic is being competitive, being team-oriented, optimistic, and also workaholic. This is the era when workaholic was kind of a badge of honor, to have those 80-hour work weeks and say, gosh, you know, I didn't have a day off. And that was really valued at that time. So some baby boomers you might see have a hard time kind of letting go of that workaholic and competitive nature. They, again, like teamwork. Again, they're still from their parents and grandparents. They have that company loyalty. Their communication style has adapted through the advancements in technology. So really efficiency is best, but they might have a preference, again, towards being in person and phone calls, believing those are most efficient. If they are continuing to work, especially retired, working part-time, utilizing them as mentors, right? That wealth of knowledge and experience of being in the workforce and adapting to many different shifts in the workforce would really empower them as mentors. Also, something that is noted is being specific with deadlines and goals. And a couple of the things I didn't mention that shaped them, you know, they grew up during the Vietnam War, civil rights movement, Watergate. So really being civic oriented and really believing in causes, might really pay attention to the news and what's going on, things like that. Just important to know for that generation. And then you have Generation X, which I'm proud to be a part of that generation. Sometimes known as the forgotten generation and also the latchkey generation, because this is the generation where we saw an increase in both parents working. When you look more towards our seniors, you know, that was a generation my parents were from, where there were more stay-at-home moms, where women were more limited in the jobs that they thought they could have, the careers they thought they could have. I remember my mom telling me she grew up thinking she could only be a teacher, a nurse, or a telephone operator. And she definitely didn't want to be a telephone operator, so she ended up being a teacher. So important to recognize with Generation X that that's when we started seeing an increase in the dual parent work environment. So latchkey kids were kind of left to their own devices. And as a result, our work ethic tends to be a little bit more independent. Again, this is where we started seeing some of the remote working. It was called telecommuting at the time. And this is kind of where we started getting a little bit skeptical about employers and whether, you know, they were doing the right thing by us. And many Generation Xers became entrepreneurial, and 50% of the startups are run by Gen X. So that's when we started seeing things start to shift and transform in the workforce in terms of casual dress days, in terms of, you know, more progressive work environments, right? Those open cubicles, open spaces, more convenient things for people to have that work-life balance, right? We will outnumber baby boomers by 2028, so we'll still be continuing to work, but some of us are starting to consider what our retirement will look like. Again, we've had to adapt to all the advancements in technology. So whatever works, whatever is most efficient works for us. But again, we were part of that generation that is bringing in that flexible work arrangement. So it is really important to us, also our own personal development. And then we have millennials, who used to be our most talked about generation, still can be at times. And some of the things they were shaped by is Columbine, 9/11, the internet, and the Great Recession. So they were privy to seeing their parents and their grandparents being laid off by companies. Many of them graduated from college during the Great Recession in 2008, so had to have multiple jobs. And that's what kind of kickstarted the gig economy in terms of having to have multiple jobs to make a living wage. So they're very achievement oriented, but also very open-minded in terms of what the workplace looks like. They're motivated by a unique work experience. And again, that skepticalness and really seeing the workplace in terms of I need someone who can be a quality manager to me, and having that sense of responsibility, not only for myself, but seeing others have responsibility, such as my colleagues and my managers. Communication style, very adaptable. This is the era where everything was advancing: emails, texting, direct messaging, multiple communication platforms, and millennials were very adaptable to that. One thing employers should know about them is really getting to know them personally, right? They are individuals. They should not be just grouped into a generalization, and they do really value a flexible schedule. And also they really value immediate feedback, right? They want to know what they're doing well. They want to know what they can improve upon. And then we have our youngest generation in the workforce, Gen Z, from 1997 to 2015. And they have been shaped by 9/11 as well, the Great Recession, as well as the pandemic. Many of Gen Z graduated college or graduated high school and were entering the workforce during the pandemic. So finding it hard to find jobs or finding remote jobs, which might not have provided a lot of hands-on training for this generation. And as you see on the graphic on the slide, 84% of Gen Z that were surveyed expect their employers to provide that formal training. So that's something to consider. They're very talked about generation because they had technology at such a young age, and that has impacted them in the workplace. So many people think they prefer social media, texting, and direct messaging, and might struggle a little bit more with interpersonal communication. I know I have a niece who started her first job. She's 25 now, but she was 23 and started a job at a museum at customer service at the front desk. And she was so nervous about answering the phone. She just didn't have the experience. She didn't have that confidence in answering the phone. And now, with help from her employer and her colleagues, it's one of her favorite parts of her job, is actually answering the phone. She's mostly taking calls from our seniors who are patrons and members of the museum, and she loves talking to them and helping them with all of their needs, whether it be technology or whether it be just finding out dates of events. So again, we're not here to stereotype or pigeonhole these different generations, but it can be important to know, what was happening during the eras that they came up in the workplace. Yes, Maria, it depends on different things, but who you talk to, some say 1997 to 2015. That's what I'm seeing the most lately. But again, it's really around every 20 years, so it can differ. And again, it's not an exact science. So if you think you belong in the different generation, you can claim that title. So I'm going to put a poll now that we've heard about all those 5 generations and their backgrounds. Is age just a number? Do you identify with the time period that you were born? Some of you might be thinking, oh my gosh, she had me spot on. How does she know I'm like that? Or you can say, no, not at all. I wish I were in the generation of my grandparents. It seemed much more slower and easier to deal with things, or maybe kind of, it just depends on the day or the time or the task that I'm doing. But looking at the poll so far, you pretty much identify with your generation. Give you one more second to add your thoughts. So 88% of you said pretty much. That's pretty accurate, and then 13% not so much. And that's why it really is important, again, not to just use this generational knowledge and background as a tool, but not use it to, again, make assumptions about our employees who may fit into those different generations, because again, we're all individuals. one thing I'd like us to do, because we are talking about how do we bring that inclusivity amongst all the generations, is think of one of the generations that I talked about, that I listed. And what is one thing maybe you appreciate, or maybe you weren't aware of, and now you're aware and you're thinking, gosh, I didn't really recognize that about that generation, that maybe they did struggle during the recession to get a job, or maybe, that they did have a hard time because of World War II, or maybe, things were more affordable and now it's become this way. What is something about a generation, and feel free to put it in the chat, that you now recognize and appreciate about that generation, right? Because again, we all bring our shared experiences to the workplace, and it's important to get to know what everybody's different experiences are. Don't be shy. Feel free to put it in the chat. And as you think about that answer, what we do know at CEA as an HR association and working with hundreds of different employers over the years is, although we are different generations, we all share similarities in terms of what we want in the workplace. And one of the main things is everyone, regardless of age, regardless of gender, regardless of whatever your diversity may be, is everybody wants respect in the workplace. And we are shifting to a more people-focused workplace. And we did have an opportunity during the pandemic for many employees to really evaluate their employers to see how they were navigating a crisis. Were they being transparent and honest navigating during the pandemic? Are they trustworthy? Were they accessible during this crisis and unprecedented times? And many employees, as we all know, decided that no, they weren't, and that led to the Great Resignation. So all employees really want that foundation of respect in a workplace. They want leaders who are trustworthy, who are accessible, who means when you say, I have an open door policy, that you really have that open door, and that you really are accessible, that you give learning opportunities to all employees. We're human beings. We want to continue and grow. So if we have been, if we're fortunate to have been with a company or an organization for a certain period of time, we want to continue to learn and grow with that company and organization. And again, as I mentioned, we all could use feedback ongoing in terms of what we're doing well, recognition of what we've done well, appreciation for what we've done, and also constructive feedback to what we can learn and move on from. But again, our individual differences outweigh generational differences. So we want to get to meet people where they are on an individual basis and learn from them what their communication styles are, what is their work ethic, how do we get the best out of them? And it will be different for everybody. So one of the comments that our employers share with us, and in a survey done, 81% of workers agreed that the primary difference between workers in the workplace is the communication styles. And again, that comes from what era did you grow up in, or did your career start in the workplace? So for our older generations, our more mature generations, if they grew up with less technology, they might be more confident with written communication, with face-to-face, with using the telephone. But it doesn't mean that they didn't adapt as their careers progressed and as technology advanced, right? We saw the integration of computers. We saw email come into play for us Gen Xers and millennials, all of the advancement in technology, and our generational natives. We saw a lot of advancements in technology, but it doesn't mean that we can't adapt at the same time to having more face-to-face interaction or using the telephone, as I mentioned with the example of my niece. We're all capable of adapting and meeting people where they are. I have another niece who's a lawyer, and when she first started at her newest job that she's in, I said, ask everybody that you're going to interact with, what is their preferred method of communication? Because they are in a hybrid setting. So some people are on site, some people are remote. What is the best communication that I'm going to get a hold of you? And it doesn't mean you're always going to use that communication preference. You may have to pick up the phone. You may have to be face-to-face, but it means you're meeting people where they are, and you're establishing some guidelines. Another thing that happened during the pandemic was many employers had to shift to some of the technology that they might not have been using in terms of communication platforms. They might have gone from being face-to-face to now using remote, and using Zoom and other virtual ways of connecting, and might not have set some parameters on what we're using and how we're using it and when we're using it. And how am I going to get a hold of Anna via email when she's working from home? How do I know she's even working? And so some employers have had to kind of reshuffle and set some parameters in place. If we are using this technology for different communication modes, let's make it clear and concise to employees that they know which methods we're using and when it becomes redundant. Even some companies are going to the extremes of not scheduling meetings on certain days, because as a result of the pandemic, we're having more meetings than we've ever had before. And it's not always efficient. So some companies have implemented no meeting Mondays or no meeting Fridays, in order to allow their employees to actually get work done that they need to accomplish. So again, it's about looking at your own organization, your own teams, and what platforms work best. When are you going to use them? And what are the parameters? What are the regulations and guidelines that you're going to put into place when you're using those different methods of communication? Because if not, if nobody knows what the rules are and how am I going to navigate these different modes of communication, communication can easily get lost in translation, and a lot of miscommunication and misunderstandings can occur. So how do we better communicate across generations? So we did this this topic at a conference on site, and in the conference, in the room, there were multiple generations represented. And one of the younger gentlemen brought up the fact that he was with a newer company and he was one of the youngest employees, and that he really felt like his voice wasn't being heard. So he was kind of excluded from certain meetings, or his opinion wasn't asked, and just felt like he wasn't being valued or seen. So one thing to keep in mind when you are having meetings, when you are having conversations about changes or putting new parameters into process, let younger generations be heard, right? Give people a voice. Make sure that you allow people to express their opinions and express their ideas. And then utilize the different communication channels. They can be very beneficial. If you can, especially if you're interviewing, to set up a Zoom call is a lot more efficient and convenient. You can do it a lot faster than getting everybody into one location at the same time. So leverage that various communication channels so that it's benefiting everybody. The art of listening hasn't gone away with all of this technology that has advanced. We're trying to communicate so fast so that we keep up with the pace of technology, but we're still human beings. So the best way of communicating is really having conversations, is really conversing either over the phone, either over a Zoom or face to face. And really, when you are having that conversation with others, really listening so you can understand, really being present in that moment, giving the privilege, the gift of your time to someone to really show them that you're listening and understanding. It is an art, and we're losing the ability to listen well, which can also cause a lot of communication issues. So make sure, we're all guilty of it, being distracted by our devices, by our thoughts, by all the things we have to do in the day. But when you're having that conversation with your employees, again, it is a gift to give them your time, but also give them your presence so that you are able to understand them best. Also, soliciting employee feedback, whether you're doing employee surveys, whether you're having one-on-one check-ins with your employees or daily team meetings, whatever you can do so that you can find out what's going on with employees rather than making assumptions about what's going on. Really getting the clear message of what's occurring, what maybe needs to improve, and then also using clear and concise language. Again, Terminologies change across generations, across industries, across businesses. There used to be a much more formal emphasis on business terminology, and it has shifted in some industries to become more informal. We use a lot of acronyms in different industries, so make sure when you're sending a message, if you're the communicator, you really want to make sure that that message is understood, that you're using the language that everybody can understand and everybody can relate to. So knowing your audience, right? So if it's a client or a customer and you might be using terminology that they're not familiar with, use terms that are going to be relatable for them, so that it's clear and concise. So again, part of this topic is really how to create an inclusive workplace. Again, not only across generations, but across the great diversity of people that we have within the workplace as well. And I just want to ask a question. When you think of that, and it might have sparked your interest to attend today, what does inclusion mean for you in the workplace? Why is it important to you, or how does it show up? What is something that you want to share in terms of that? What does inclusion mean? Love to hear from you. And really, what I believe it is really bringing that diversity, harnessing it and using it in a way that is beneficial for everybody, right? Really recognizing that we do all come from different backgrounds, different perspectives. We all grew up differently. People had different parents than me. People grew up in different cultures. We have different ethnicities and different races. So that gives us a different perspective that makes us unique individuals. So we want to harness that diversity so we can use it and put it into practice to create a more inclusive and respectful work environment. So you're looking at the picture maybe of the cake and you're saying, what does that have to do with inclusivity? Well, when you're making that cake, and maybe you started baking during the pandemic, there's a lot of wonderful individual ingredients that go into baking a cake that are unique on their own. But if you want to make a great cake, you actually have to incorporate those ingredients. So you may have a diverse workplace already in terms of generations, in terms of gender, in terms of ethnicity. But in order to really have that inclusive workplace, you got to incorporate all of that diversity to make the mix work, right? To make that inclusive work environment. And one of the things about having an inclusive work environment is having that sense of belonging, right? That's what it means to me in terms of being inclusive. It means I feel like I belong to the company or the organization that I'm working for. I feel like I can bring my true self to the workplace, and I feel that I'm seen. Unlike that young gentleman that brought it up in the conversation at that conference, being seen means I'm recognized at work. I'm respected by my colleagues. My feedback is solicited. My opinions are asked for in terms of what can we do in the workplace to make it better? What ideas do I have? It also means I feel connected at work. I have people that I'm interacting with, that I have a connection with. That sense of belonging is a human need. It's one of the human needs that we have as human beings. And so we want to feel connected. We want to have those positive experiences with our colleagues, our peers, our managers, our senior leaders. And that means connecting on a human level, not just a work level, right? Knowing, especially during the pandemic, that we have a shared connection, that we can relate to each other in certain areas. And we have that true human experience. When I feel seen at work, when I feel connected at work, then I tend to be more supported at work. I feel like people have my back. They understand me. They ask for my opinion. And if I'm in a position where I need some help, maybe I'm overwhelmed with work, I've gotten too many projects, then I feel comfortable sharing that with other people and having them help take on some of the load. And I think we're really great at doing that on my team at CEA. There's ebbs and flows to work. And we all have different times where we're super busy, and maybe we have other times where we can take on some of our colleagues and peers' work. But when I feel seen, when I feel connected, I have that connection, I'm really going to feel supported in those times where I might need a little extra help, or where I may offer that extra help to somebody else. And whenever I have all of those elements, then I tend to be prouder of my work and the organization and company that I work for. And that's really important when you are, or if you are right now, in a position of hiring. Who's better to support you and be your brand ambassador than your employees, to give you referrals for employees? So when you feel proud of your company, then you're going to highlight it to your friends, to your family members that you might refer to working with you. But in essence, when you're proud, you feel aligned with the purpose of the company, the vision and values that is so important to so many different generations represented in our workforce. So what can prevent that inclusivity at work is our own unconscious bias, and it is normal, folks. It is wired in our brain. Our brain tries to make quick judgments about people. It's that fight or flight mode, right? We want to determine whether someone or a situation is safe or not. So we make quick judgments about people. We make quick connections based on our own previous experiences, not based on facts. And so then we might jump to making assumptions about people. So it is normal. And I'm just going to put up a few statements here that might be some biases about generations and see if you can fill in the blank. So number one, what generation do you think this is referring to? Blank are entitled and expect to become managers right away. Which generation do you think that was focused on? No guesses. Blank or entitled expect to. So the statement, and it could be used for several, but it was for the millennials. Millennials are entitled, expect to become managers right away. Number two, blank can barely use a cell phone. Blank can barely use a cell phone. And again, it's okay to, baby boomers, very good, Maria. Thank you for participating. It is a bias, it is a stereotype, we know it, but it has been said about baby boomers, which is ironic because baby boomers were part of creating smartphones and cell phones, but not everybody can use a cell phone. Number three, blank are too reliant on technology. Sure, everybody can think of that answer. Yes, yes. Gen Z are too reliant on technology is the correct stereotype. And then number four, blank are very close-minded. Which generation do you think that was focused on? Gen X. For this one, it was actually traditionalist. But of course, this could be used for all generations, right? We can all be closed-minded, especially if we do, again, rely on those stereotypes and generalizations about each generation as well, right? So one way that we can avoid or address our own biases is really being self-aware, right, of our thoughts, our actions, before we make assumptions about others. Are we really, do we really know the facts, or are we just basing this on our previous experiences? And adopt varying communication styles. Listen more than you talk. Learn about people. You may assume someone is from a certain generation. They may not be. You may assume other things based on other stereotypes about people. So we really want to eliminate that from our mindsets. But again, it's normal. We're going to have those triggers that make those quick assumptions and judgments about people. But I just encourage you to really be aware of when you're doing it. I can remember, I'll never forget this, in one meeting I had on site. It was a small hospital, and the CFO was making a comment about he didn't want to hire any millennials. And as you saw from what we shared already, millennials are going to be the most represented population for many years to come. So do you think there weren't any millennials in that room? There certainly were. So we had to have a very extended conversation with that comment about millennials and some of the biases that he had about that, and how it was preventing him and his team from having a really inclusive work environment. So again, it's a habit. It can just come up, but just being self-aware, noticing when you're starting to make those assumptions and judgments about people. The way you can eliminate that is really by getting to know that person and listening and asking questions with sincerity and a genuine curiosity for that person. Other strategies for creating that inclusive culture is, again, avoiding making those age-based assumptions and other stereotypes. I can't tell you how many workshops I've gone in where people are self-deprecating and really highlighting how they're not good with technology or other things, and that just kind of gives a message to someone else. So also, don't be hard on yourselves, right? We all have strengths. We all have things we can improve upon. It doesn't have to represent all generations. Also, again, the thing we have in common is being respectful with people, being flexible and understanding and meeting people where they are, being open-minded enough to adopt different communication styles. One thing is meetings that I mentioned before. We are having a lot more of them, but sometimes they're run in a similar way, and some of us respond differently in terms of meetings. So you might have a meeting where someone's always outspoken, who's always expressing their opinion, and they might dominate the conversation. They might dominate the meeting, where you might have people on your team who might need to process the information that was shared, and they might want to communicate some of their opinions or answers in a different form. So it might be a email, it might be speaking with their manager on a one-on-one basis. So meeting people where they are, where you're going to get the best out of them is another way. Recognizing each other's strengths. What do people do well, and how do you, again, get the best out of them? It's going to be different for different people. Some people like being in a really energized room. They like being in a space with a lot of people. Other people are more independent. They want to work alone. They don't want to be micromanaged, or they can handle things a lot more independently, and just check in with them, though. Really motivating people to grow, finding the potential in them, seeing opportunities that people can use and strengthen their natural talents and abilities, and creating opportunities for people to connect so you strengthen those relationships. Having those regular water cooler conversations to get to know people better. Another thing to think about is your onboarding process. Again, remember that the Gen Z were saying they wanted more formal training and didn't get a lot of that during the pandemic, when things were kind of chaotic and maybe didn't get a lot of formal training, and just doing it in different ways, creating different processes for younger workers, having a buddy or mentor system so they have someone who's providing them with some new tools and strategies, having different ways of training. It can be face-to-face, it can be individual, it can be on demand, making sure you have opportunities, if you do have remote workers, that they're getting to meet people from different departments and have, again, those opportunities to connect and have conversations. While you're onboarding, make sure that you're emphasizing what are the company values, what are you representing as a whole, so employees know who they're working for, and that what was said in the interview process really stands true once they get to the workplace environment. Gamification is just an interactive technological tool that is more fun, that can be more, that some employers utilize as well during the onboarding process. So some things to think about to switch it up, right? Because we don't want to be stuck in old ways of doing things. Our workplace, if you haven't noticed already, has shifted, has had a major transformation and is continuing to transform. So we want to keep up and progress with the change. And then the benefits of having generational diversity and diversity in general at work is the ability for people of different perspectives and different backgrounds to be able to share their knowledge at whatever level and whatever area of speciality that might be. That will in turn enhance performance and productivity. It can enhance problem solving, people looking at things from a different mindset, and can really contribute to having a more open-minded workforce. And then again, one thing that we all find and value very much in the workplace is maintaining that foundation of respect. You really have to walk the walk and talk the talk. And if you are in a position of leadership, maintaining that foundation of respect is one of our responsibilities as a leader. So recognizing that we do all come to work from different backgrounds, different points of view, giving and allowing people the space to be different and be who they truly are, valuing the contributions of all employees by recognizing them, by appreciating them on a regular basis. Gallup says that for an engaged employee, they're recognized at work at least once every 7 days. Are you doing that with your employees? Are you recognizing employees for their contributions on a regular basis? Positively communicating and collaborating, making sure that you have some guidelines and parameters for what positive communication looks like and sounds like at work, that you're treating your employees consistently and fairly. Again, of course, if you are in a position of leadership, that's especially important. And listening. If one thing you can do is really practice the art of listening, being present, turn off those devices. We've all become addicted to technology, or at least the majority of us, from what I've observed over the last few years. So let's take a step back and really listen and make that space for employees. And as I said earlier, we're really shifting towards a more people-focused work environment, which involves bringing back humanity to the workplace, which involves the foundation of respect, building that sense of belonging, letting people bring their true authentic selves to work, having a sense of purpose and meaning at work, having some fun at work, hopefully having some team building and some opportunities for fun that will empower and provide energy for every person. I can't imagine any generation who doesn't appreciate that in the workplace. So hopefully some of these ideas have sparked something in you, and I encourage you, as I attend a lot of webinars, is just to think of one thing you learned or took away from this session that you can take action on starting today, that will improve and help contribute to the overall inclusivity at work. Love to hear if you thought of something already, but while you think about something, I'm going to turn it back over to Anna and let us have her close us out.
All right. Thanks, Keisha. And thank you all for being so engaged in the chat. Love to see that. And with the polls, love to see an engaged group. So as you see on the screen, if you are here for continuing education credits today, your HRCI code is 67-1065. Sure. I'm sorry. I don't know why there's a dash. Usually there's only a dash in SHRM. I think that was our formatting thing. Just bear with us. 671065. No dash in HRCI. Your SHRM code does have the dash, 24-RZ7TW. I'm also dropping that in the chat as well. If for any reason you run into any trickiness in redeeming those codes, just shoot us an email, ceainfo@employers.org. We will make sure that you get your credits for joining us live today. And as I mentioned, we do have a survey. So it is 5 questions. It takes less than a minute. I'm going to drop a little link, hold on, into the chat. There we go. My Control V was not cooperating with me. And then at the end of today, when you close out Zoom, you'll also see a browser window pop up to make it easier for you. So if you could take the minute to answer those 5 questions, we then share the feedback with our partners over at Monterey, and it just really helps us. Brenda, I sent it via email. I thought I also dropped it in the chat. What I'm going to do is send a follow-up email with a copy of the PDF, since I think I may have forgotten to put it in the chat, or I'll just put it in right now. But in the meantime, I want to say thank you to Laura and Pearl and the entire team behind the scenes for not just sponsoring today, but also having a wonderful HR hotline. And there we go. So I just put it into the chat. If you click on it, it will download locally to your drive. So if you have any trouble accessing that, again, ceainfo@employers.org. And we look forward to catching you on the next HR hotline. Thank you again, Keisha, for sharing your expertise and your time with us. Thank you all for joining us live and being so engaged. And we will see you. We get an email to use the codes for the certificates of excellence. Jessica, if you want to shoot us an email, ceainfo@employers.org. I just want to make sure I understand your question And then we will make sure that you use the codes for the certificates of yeah. Send us an email because I want to make sure I give you the correct advice. So we can help you offline there and make sure that you get the credit for today. Okay. So thank you all again for hanging with us, and enjoy the rest of your week. And we'll see you on another training or on the HR hotline soon. Cheers. Thanks, everyone.